Welcome to the Fresh Vending podcast, where we discuss how smart vending machines are revolutionizing fresh food accessibility for both creators and consumers.
Hello, and welcome to one more episode of the Fresh Vending podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Downs, joined by my co-host, Isaac Wu. Mr. Wu, what are we talking about today?
Well, Mr. Downs, really important topic. Top 5 mistakes in smart vending.
Ooh, that sounds daunting. Well, I think it would be good for us to preface this with smart vending is very new in the United States. It's been around other parts of the world for a very long time, but I would say it's really only shown its face in a significant way probably mid-late pandemic. It was around, but there wasn't a lot of footprints out there. So when we talk about this, it's more so in a way of sharing the learnings that operators are having across the United States, because if you haven't noticed, it's hard to walk through an airport in the United States today and not see smart vending. And I think that's just kind of a little bit of foreshadowing of where we're going with large buildings that have a lot of foot traffic. So when you think about missteps or mistakes, Isaac, that new operators make that has a significant impact, what comes to mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would just say in one word, attitudinal. Someone once asked me, what is one of the most challenging things about running a smart vending company? Or what are the biggest things that are roadblocks when you're trying to pitch this to customers? And I tell them it's giving them the right paradigm shift when it comes to, this is not a vending machine. It's not traditional food service either. It's somewhere in between where you're selling high quality fresh food 24/7 without a cashier, right? So maybe we can start at the beginning, which is the time it takes to launch. A lot of people think, oh, it's a fridge? Yes. Does it require any special outlet? No. Well, then I can just plug it in and get going, right? Well, not exactly, right? Because there are many things that have to happen with not only the hardware, but the software, right? The only way the fridge works is because there is RFID technology in our case, or computer vision or weight-based technology. And the software side of things, where you get to see everything on the dashboard, that has to get set up. And of course, you have to take the time to choose a good location. And it's not the location that you think of when it comes to traditional vending machines. These are not in the back by the bathrooms. They need to be in high foot traffic locations where people want to go to actually purchase a salad, not in some dusty corner.
Yeah, so I think with us, the typical timeline that we tell our operators is it takes about a month. And that's from when you actually receive the fridge in your possession, because you're setting up, merchant accounts for, the bank transactions and flow of funds. You mentioned the dashboard, and that's what the manager uses on a daily basis. We also have a unique smartphone app. That's what the person stocking the fridge uses on a daily basis. Those things have to get set up. And then also with your fridge, it's just a matter of setting up the interior. So it's like, making little signage for each shelf that tells a little bit about your product, playing with the height of the shelves, playing with the width of the rows. You can just slap your product in there and, try to sell as fast as humanly possible. But if the one thing that we've learned consistently is the more thought and intention you put into setting up your fridge, the better amenity it's going to be and the higher ROI you're going to have. And that's just a fact that happens every single time with operators that just kind of put more thought into their experience.
And then there's the training piece, of course, right? Some companies are more hands-on with their training than others. We tend to be a little more hands-on because we know some of these missteps that people take. So, for example, our training is 2 weeks where we teach someone how to stock the fridge and merchandise the products and use the dashboard, because a lot of food service operators have never used something like this before. And we find that the more training, the better.
Yeah. In addition to that, so if somebody comes to us and they're maybe a university or a hospital, well, then there can be a lot of people involved, from finance to marketing to IT, operations, the list goes on and on. But maybe if it's a small, mom and pop style restaurant, maybe that's one person that's wearing all those hats. But regardless, again, putting all that thought into what goes into this and say, let me put on my marketing cap for a second and say, how do I let the people in this community know about the fridge? Am I putting signs near the elevator? Is there an email blast that goes out? Is there a newsletter? Maybe I want to run a promotion. All those types of things that really matter, just like you're launching a restaurant that make it successful. Those are also the types of things that can be happening in that 2-week period. So some of our operators that have the plug it in, put the food in, start selling as fast as humanly possible, that's fine if that's what you want to do with the fridge, and it's capable of doing that. But for those that want to dig a few levels deeper and have a more comprehensive program that perhaps represents their brand a little bit better and gets them to hitting their ceiling of sales a lot faster, that's what that month-long period, those are all the things that are happening during that time.
Yeah, and this is not to mention if you have some closed loop payment system where you want to integrate it with a campus card, for example, if you're in a university, or maybe it's a payroll deduct plan. That, of course, there are many stakeholders there, and it's a little out of your control and out of the smart vending company's control at times because you have to work with the payment processor. So again, a lot of things that you have to take into account when you launch a smart fridge or a smart vending solution. So yeah, I would say that's number one, probably the biggest mistake is the underestimation of the amount of time it takes to launch.
And effort within that time. So it's not just a calendar month, but it's, I would say if you had a very simple operation and, you knew where you were going to go, and maybe this is a mom and pop where one person's wearing a lot of hats, you're probably going to want to put 10 to 12 hours in that final, 7 to 10 days before you launch for stocking and really understanding and think those things through. And I think that's the bare bones, let alone in the 3 weeks prior to that, the type of things you're going to be doing of setting up merchant accounts that, are a handful more hours. So just being ready to do that with intention and having that expectation going in that we're not selling Snickers and Snapples.
Yeah, and just to linger on this a little bit more, we like to use the terminology soft launch, where someone's not necessarily announcing it to all of their community at first. Nathan, what do you hope that the operator learns in this soft launch period that, we would expect them to learn?
That's a great question. So getting to know the technology. So the first time that, any of our listeners ever used a smartphone, it was super cool, but there's some things you had to learn, and the technology is a little bit different. It's easy today because you've used it a million times, but it's getting to go in. For example, like it's very common that operators will take one of our smart stickers, and maybe we talk to them and say, put it in the dead center of your clamshell, with the plastic clamshell for the salads every single time. And maybe there's a new employee that's in there and they do it, and maybe it's on the side or crooked, or they forgot to put it on, or these things happen, right? When you're working in an operation and there's a lot of things going on. So sometimes you could have the products are placed inconsistently, the stickers are placed inconsistently. We'll have operators that are using the keys to stock it instead of using the smartphone app. Little things like that aren't a big deal, but why not learn them in a soft launch with a small group of people, so that when you get to the point where you're ready to do a hard launch and you've called, whether it's friends and family or emailed everybody in the entire building, that you're just having great experiences that are a really good representation of your brand day one. And that's exactly why at least every restaurant that I ever worked in earlier in my career, we always did a soft launch to just kind of get out the kinks and make sure the operation's running smooth.
Yeah, that's great. And again, this is not a comment on operators. It's more a comment on how new the technology is to many communities at this point in the US. And I will say we have some operators that, are really on top of their game. They learn the technology very quickly and launch within, probably fastest was like 2 weeks for that one high school, right? And they sold $500 on the first day. So, it really depends, but we would say on average, it probably takes a month to soft launch.
Yeah, it's good to plan on a month.
Right. Yeah, so that'd probably be mistake number one. And I would say number two might be the merchandising piece.
I think for sure. And that's a good one, Isaac, because the merchandising piece is probably the single most important piece. And for those of you that sometimes merchandising can sound like a heavy-handed term, but it's really the very intentional thought process of thinking, what should I put in here? Where am I going to put it? How am I going to price it? What the mix of not only prices, but things with different shelf life and should I put this at eye level versus down below? And really thinking through that, and all of that really should come back to who is my target demographic. I may personally love turkey sandwiches with alfalfa sprouts, but if the people in the building don't like that, then my feeling about it doesn't matter, right? Because I'm in the business of selling food and not throwing it in the garbage. So it's really getting in tune with the people that are in the building first, and that's hands-on, asking questions, shaking hands, interacting, so that day one your offering is highly relevant, and then over time continuing to talk and iterate on that and refine that offering into something that is really representative and dialed into the people that are in that space on a daily basis.
Yeah, and again, I just want to point out great examples of this. I know some of our operators, they have a QR code on the fridge where it has a survey that asks people, what would you like to see in the fridge? Great example of someone who wants to dial in their merchandising. And that's just the quality and the selection of products in there. But maybe we can talk about the frequency of merchandising too, because again, the set it and forget it mentality of a traditional vending machine with Cheez-Its and, cookies and things like that, that's not necessarily going to work with a very aesthetic high-end fridge with fresh food, right? If that thing's empty, that sends a bit of a message to your customers as well, right? So always trying to keep the fridge stocked is something that we see is a challenge for a lot of people. And it's a good challenge because it means people are buying the product.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think fresh food is personal, right? And there's that cliche of people say, when I go into the restaurant, I check and see how clean the bathroom is. As humans, there's a risk of eating fresh food, right? You could have a bad experience and waste your money and throw it in the garbage. You could get sick. So there's lots of little telltale signs that we look for to help inform us as to, is the food safe? Is it going to taste good? Like all these, things that we want to know. And having a fridge that's clean, well stocked, those are telltale signs. That's one of the reasons that we make our fridges out of stainless steel, because we feel that all of these little telltale signs are an extension of the brand, the product, that somebody looks at that and says, this is not your average vending machine. And they may like the packaging that you use. They may like the labels, the aesthetic of the food, the fact that the fridge is stainless steel, but really it's all of those things together that give them a feeling of, I feel confident in this brand. I feel confident in this experience. And this is something that I want to do on a regular basis and build this into my routine as a destination to get fresh food and not a, last ditch effort alternative.
Yeah, that's great. So we have number one, make sure you give yourself enough time to launch. Number two, learn how to merchandise your fridge, really get to know what your people want to eat and how to present that food in a way that is appealing and that gives people confidence in your brand. And I would say, of course, and keep it stocked frequently so that it's not empty. And what kind of sprouts from this, I think, is learning from the data, right? One of the biggest strengths of smart vending is you have a dashboard that's constantly showing you which items do you have to take out of the fridge most frequently because no one's buying them. What hours of the day are you selling out of this type of yogurt? I mean, those are all nudges for your merchandising strategy, right? Stock more of those yogurts at that time of the day. Maybe don't make as much of the egg salad sandwiches that aren't selling too hot at 6 p.m. and maybe you should stock them at 12 p.m. All this data is there for your benefit and your brand's benefit. So I would say not paying attention to the data, not learning from the data would be another mistake.
Yeah, I mean, the data is going to coach you. I mean, I think most smart fridge companies, I know ours does on our dashboard, there's little visualization tiles that tell you, here's your top 10 best-selling items, here's your top 10 most wasted items, usually from food expiration. So, I mean, that right there, that list should always be driving, your thoughts around, you know what, maybe if I want to have the variety of tuna and turkey sandwiches, let's look at the data. If tuna is the number one wasted item, then maybe you don't have to replace that with a salami sandwich. You can try it. Or maybe the answer is that you put something shelf stable in that space that's not going to waste at all. So it's really I like Isaac when he talks about his health, as he says, be your own scientist. So look at a combination of the data, your knowledge for your customer base, your products that you have available, and really kind of triangulate, like, how do I continue to refine this fridge over time? Because sometimes you just need to get rid of certain items. Or another big one is talking to customers and saying, it's great that you love our signature turkey Swiss sandwich, but you're only going to come eat that once, maybe twice a week. What's that item that would make you come every single day? Is there a bottled drink, or is there something? And quite often it'll be something that the operator maybe doesn't already have in inventory. But if you can start bringing people to your fridge every day because you're making their ritual items like hyper convenient, that things like that can be a real game changer. So again, get out there, talk to the people, look at the data, and then also just use your experience as somebody that's in hospitality and food service to kind of bring those things together to make the amenity and the ROI like everything that it can be.
Great. Do you have any other common mistakes that people make in mind that you want to share?
Yeah, I think physically where the fridge is located. So I know that many times we've had operators that said, I'm going into this building, it's just absolute gangbusters. I mean, the foot traffic there is amazing. And that breaks out into two different scenarios. So maybe the first scenario is, I'm going into the county hospital, tons of people there. And you're like, wow, sounds great. And then you get there and you can't find the fridge. And they're like, oh, well, it's on the second floor, down the hallway, third door on your right. There's an ice machine, and it's on the other side of the ice machine. And I'm scratching my head saying, okay, hospital's busy. But who's walking by and noticing that smart fridge hiding behind the big old ice machine, on floor 2 and the third door on the right? So that's one thing, is your footprint within the building should be celebrated. You are an amenity to that building. You are the hood ornament to that building, because how special is it that they have fresh food 24/7? So make sure that you have representation, right next to the elevators where everybody has to walk by every single morning. Those types of spaces, I think that's a common mistake. The other common mistake is going into a building that says, oh, we have 400 residents in this building. It's one of the biggest, skyscrapers in downtown, whatever it may be. And they're super excited to have you there. Of course, the buildings are going to want you there because you're bringing in this free amenity, or maybe they're even charging you a little bit to be in the space. You're bringing in this amenity to them and they don't have to do anything, right? So maybe you find out that out of those 400 residents, through the winter months, half of them have a vacation home down in Florida that they go to. Maybe the other, third travel frequently for business. When you really get down to it, maybe you're like, oh, there's only 50 people that walk by this every day, and 20 of them are the Amazon UPS delivery guys. So again, not kind of necessarily taking things at face value to make sure that, you could have avoided that if you had sat one day around lunchtime for 1 hour and just sat there, and maybe you're working on your laptop and you're just clicking how many people walk by that space, to give yourself a little bit of independent empirical data that helps you make really smart decisions. Because can you put a smart fridge in and then take it out 3 months later when you realize it doesn't work? Sure, but it's probably cost tons of time and tons of money to learn that the hard way, when you can just negotiate these things up front, that you are next to the elevators in the lobby, that you are going into a building that has the foot traffic that you were led to believe is actually there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now that we've talked about some of these common mistakes, I kind of want to talk about some superstars and things that they do in order to make their fridge a huge success. I'm thinking wrapping the fridge, branding it. I'm thinking putting items in there that can't be found anywhere else in their community or in their business. Those are things that I think make our superstars really stick out.
Yeah, I think those are two big ones. Some other big ones that come to mind is, again, it goes back to like understanding your customer. So what hours of the day are people actually in the building? Is it that scenario of an office building where it's kind of like a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. kind of thing? Or is it the hospital scenario where it's 24 hours a day? Because then we start thinking about meal periods and really putting yourself in your customer's shoes, right? So if it's that, in either of those scenarios, we'd want to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Maybe there's some snacks in the mix. Maybe there's some things like some soups. But if you're going into an office building and you're thinking about dinner, is that a microwavable lasagna for one? Is it a microwavable lasagna for four? Are the people that work in there, is there a lot of parents there? Or is there a lot of like singles that are, in their 20s and 30s? So really understanding the difference of how, if you're going to have something like a microwavable dinner, like what's relevant to that group? Because in a hospital, I would think that most often that person's just going to be microwaving it, eating themselves. Whereas in that office environment, they're going to be taking something home to eat by themselves or potentially with a family. So just kind of, again, digging in, getting to know those things better. Maybe when you get into that office, you realize that there's a big group that likes to go to CrossFit gyms. Well, there goes another light bulb of how can I tweak this so that the meals that I have maybe lean healthy. Maybe it's something where you decide to lean a little bit paleo. Maybe it's something that you decide to put protein bars in there that are more popular with that type of community. So those are the types of things that you want to think about when you get into those environments, is hitting all the different meal periods, but then always passing it through the lens of who is my community here.
Yeah, that's great. So what have we learned? When you're launching a smart fridge, adjust your expectations of how long it's going to take to launch. All the stakeholders involved, the training that has to be done, and even if you're just a one-man show or one-woman show, the different dashboards and software that need to get set up. It'll take about a month, maybe a little longer if you have other integrations. Number two, learn what your community loves and how they interact with your fridge. And that covers so many things like merchandising and keeping it stocked. Keep your fridge stocked with food that your customers will want to come back for, and know exactly what times of the day they come, and adjust your merchandising accordingly. Continue to learn from your data. Understand how you can continually decrease the amount of shrinkage you have and also increase your sales. Wrap your fridge. Make it a very brand forward experience if you wish. And we find that tends to do very well. If you really want to make your fridge a popular spot, put items in there that your customers can't get anywhere else. And again, location, right? Put it in a place where people are. And if need be, visit that place and check it out. Did I miss anything from the summary?
No, I think that's good. I think these are really, these are some really high level things of best practices, biggest challenges. But I mean, ultimately, it's why we have this podcast, right? Is to be able to actively share these types of things, because these are relevant, whether you work with FoodSpot or one of our competitors. These are things that we know are highly relevant parts of the conversation. And it's why we continue to produce these podcasts, so that it's something that we can share that information. And we're also constantly learning from our community about what they're seeing, what's working well, what's not working well. So I think this is a good introduction. And if you ever want to have it be more conversational, you can always reach out at launchfoodspot.com or email us at hello@launchfoodspot.com. And we're more than happy to sit down and, have these conversations, again, whether you work with us or not. And we always have these conversations with our operators to, just like they're digging in with their customers, we dig in with them and say, well, help us understand, how is your meal kit company different from this other meal kit company? Let's talk about your location. Let's put our minds together to think about how can we best prepare you by sharing some of our experiences, understanding where you're coming from, so that you're as successful as you can be when you finally get into your space.
Yeah, hopefully this helped. If you're an operator with FoodSpot or another fridge company, share this with your team if you think this is something that will make your fridge more successful. If you'd like to learn more, you can always reach out to us, as Nathan said. And lastly, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Fresh Vending Podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the show this week. If you're interested in learning more about smart vending platforms, you can visit us at launchfoodspot.com. I'm Nathan Downs, and you've been listening to the Fresh Vending Podcast.